Good morning, members of the MAG Regional Council. This meeting is now called to order.
Good morning to the Transportation Policy Committee. This meeting is now called to order.
Saying to Jack, I think this is the first time we've done a joint meeting in all my time on this committee. For those around the table, please turn on the microphone when speaking so that those joining virtually can hear you. For those participating via Zoom, please remember to unmute your device before speaking. Mute when you are not speaking to create a positive experience for all attendees. When speaking, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. This really helps the people who are taking down notes and recording for the record. Phone participants should use *6 to mute, unmute, and *9 to raise their hand. The MAG public comment process provides opportunities for members of the public to comment on items scheduled on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. 2 opportunities are provided for public comment, including a call to the audience and action items to be heard. If you would like to comment on today's meeting, please fill out a white request speak card. Looks like this, located on the information table in the hallway. Please be sure to indicate the item for which you want to speak and give it to a designated MAG staff member. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website prior to the meeting, as long as the comments are received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time. Don't forget, if you parked in the garage, please remember to validate your ticket. Parking validators are available on the information table in the hallway. For those who purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Please note that hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. With all that being said, we will now begin the joint meeting with a roll call of all the members of the MAG Regional Council. Andrea?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will go down the list of members. Please unmute and indicate if you are here. Mayor Bien Wilner. Vice Mayor Brown.
I'm here.
Thank you. President Burnett. Mayor Carlott.
I'm here.
Thank you. Ms. Daniels.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Giles.
Here.
Thank you. Supervisor Goodman.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Hartke.
Present.
Thank you. President Javier.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Hermosillo.
Here.
Thank you. Supervisor Hickman. Mayor LaVault.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Governor Roe Lewis. Vice Mayor Manfredi.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Meck.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Molina.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Osborne.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Ortega.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Pereira.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Les Peterson.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Bridget Peterson.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Pizzillo.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Riggs. Mayor Rodriguez. Mayor Schoaf.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Smith.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Walter. Mayor Wires.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Woods.
Here.
Thank you. And our chair is present. Mr. Chair, we have a
Thank you for that. Chairman Sellers?
Thank you. We will now begin the joint meeting with a roll call of all members of the Transportation Policy Committee. Linda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Rock Arnett.
I am here.
Thank you. David Barry.
Here.
Thank you. Doug DeCluson.
I am here.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego. Here. Thank you. Mayor Giles.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Harkey.
Still here.
Thank you. Charles Huelmantel. Councilmember Janik. Cheryl Lombard.
Here.
Thank you. Jackie Meck.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Orsborn.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Bridget Peterson.
Here.
Thank you. Mark Reardon. Thank you. Councilmember Schaefer.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Stipp. Mayor Wires.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Wheatley. Thank you. Mayor Woods.
Here.
Thank you. And Chair, you are present. We do have a quorum.
Excuse me, Chair, I would just say that I am standing in for Scottsdale. And Janik, Councilwoman, is not available, so I'm representing Scottsdale.
Thank you, Mayor. Did we miss anyone on the phone with that roll call? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm here. This is Supervisor Clint Hickman.
Thank you, Supervisor. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I don't know if I've ever seen a more crowded regional council meeting, even on Taco Tuesdays when we used to have those. So we do have some new members of the committee, but there are some people in the audience who I'd like to acknowledge because we don't get to see them often. We have the new CEO of Valley Metro, Jessica. How are you? We have Centra Hoffman from Westmark. Hi, Centra. And Tim, looking very fashionable today. Tim from GPEC. Tim, where are you? Tim was in the kitchen preparing all the meals. We'd also like to welcome two members to the MAG Regional Council, Vice Mayor Jeff Brown. Jeff, where you at? Sir, how are you? Well, thank you. Town of Queen Creek, and Vice Mayor Vincent Manfredi, City of Maricopa.
I'm here online.
Jeff, thank you for filling in today. I don't know if it's gonna be a permanent, I'm assuming it's be a permanent position, but just please relay to your council and your staff our heartfelt loss for
I appreciate that very much. And also joining us today is Councilmember Wheatley. She will be the mayor in January. She's running unopposed. So we're happy to be able to join.
I said this, we lost a very powerful voice, and Queen Creek is an integral part of this organization, and we look forward to having you on board permanently. Chairman Sellers?
Okay, I would also like to welcome several new members to the Transportation Policy Committee. They are Councilmember Betty Janik from City of Scottsdale, being represented today by Mayor Ortega. Councilmember Julia Wheatley, Town of Queen Creek, and State Transportation Board Member Jackie Meck. Thank you all for joining the Transportation Policy Committee.
It's almost like we rehearsed this. This is the opportunity for public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for call of the audience unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. Members of the public who are attending in person may deliver their comments from the lectern at the front of the room. You have up to 3 minutes to complete your comments. A timer is provided to assist you. When the light on the timer changes from green to yellow, you have 1 minute remaining. If the light turns red, a buzzer will sound, meaning your allotted time has expired. I have received one request to speak. Is that correct? Ms. Barker, would you mind coming up? Let's get you
We have people online.
Hey, good afternoon, and it is a pleasure to see so many people in person at this important joint meeting. My name's Diane Barker, and I've lived in the Valley for 3 decades in 7 different cities. Presently, Phoenix. Multimodal feels good. I got my bus ticket, and I do use these if I have an extra. And I like to see transit move. And when there are arguments because somebody can't pay their fare or whatever, it's not good. It slows down the system and it can create violence. So that's what I'm about. I love the express buses. I see in your plan, you do want to, on the expanded highways, put in busways. It brings more in at the fare box. Frankly, from what I've seen, in local trips, I'm almost thinking it should be run like a library, and totally, because it's already 3/4 public paid, all paid. So we didn't have to slow down the system with this, and even on the light rail. But I understand you're tight for money. I'm not going to talk on this veto of this bill 2685 because it's not in the MAG rules if I'm speaking now, and also because I want to hear from you on what you think about this. I see we're expanding some of the transit and we may be cutting back on highways, and I don't know whether that's the reason why the governor vetoed it or not, but we know, just as we're politically divided here and in this country today, we're divided on transportation. Those that want to keep on going by their petrol car, and those that want electric cars and would like to have some mass transit. And I happen to know that you can live in this valley, and certainly in Phoenix, without car ownership. And if you don't believe me, spend an afternoon with me. I will create and help you get around this valley and be free and independent of your family that's going to pick you up, demand transit, and you can be a full human being. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barker. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak? Seeing none. Andrea, Linda, do we have any comment cards? And I know you want to take them separately if we do Regional Council and TPC.
We do, Mr. Chair. TPC has received 5 public comments, and I will read them now. First comment is from Kyle Foxcroft from Phoenix. I want to publicly voice my extreme disappointment and frustration with the vetoing of the momentum plan by state officials. This plan is vital to maintaining Maricopa County's competitive edge by funding projects that allow for continued economic growth. In addition, we must make investments in all multimodal options if we are to combat the effects of the urban heat island and climate change in the valley. The state should not have its thumb on regional planning, and it is absolutely ludicrous that this well-constructed plan was vetoed. End comment. Beginning of next comment by Kaylee Foxcroft, a resident of Phoenix. I'm worried that the state is interfering with the will of the voters in Maricopa County. Not here for these vibes. Our state politicians vetoed the momentum plan and blocked it from going to voters. Please fix this. Anthony Rios Garola. I'm sorry, that was end of last comment. This is the new comment. Anthony Rios Garola. I am disappointed by Governor Doug Ducey's veto of House Bill 2685. The Phoenix metro area needs to continue to make progress on improvements to the transit system if we want to stay true to our climate action goals. Moreover, voters are overwhelmingly in favor of the regional tax, so it is unfair for the governor to refuse the people the chance to vote on something like this. I strongly support all actions we can take to ensure the extension of the half-cent sales tax for transportation. End comment. New comment by Cindy Gahn. On behalf of the Phoenix Community Alliance Board of Directors, Public Affairs Committee, and the full membership, we convey our strong support for the continuation of the county transportation excess tax bill. House Bill 2685 would have allowed voters to extend the regional sales tax for transportation, Prop 400. Its veto endangers the maintenance, operation, and expansion of many diverse transportation projects. Some risk being eliminated altogether. Projects affected include and are not limited to complete streets, commuter light rail, buses, and freeways. Since Proposition 400 was initially acted in 2004, transportation investment needs have grown substantially throughout Maricopa County. Allowing voters to extend the county transportation excess tax will ensure these needs are met on an ongoing basis to support the multimodal system of the Regional Transportation Plan. Support for this bill will enhance the quality of life for those throughout the communities you serve and the downtown Phoenix area we serve. As background, PCA is a 39-year-old business leadership and advocacy organization for greater downtown Phoenix with more than 280 members ranging from small nonprofit community organizations to large corporations, from college students and private professionals to startup businesses. Through PCA's advocacy committees, including our multimodal connectively committee, our members work to create a stronger downtown for greater Phoenix. Thank you for your continued work in this matter. We are pleased to add our names to the hundreds of Arizona residents, public officials, and community organizations that have already communicated their support for the continuation of the county transportation excess tax. Moreover, thank you for your public service. Sincerely, Cindy Gahn, Senior Director, Phoenix Community Alliance. End of comment. My final comment is from Jamie Truffin, resident of Glendale. Start of comment. As someone who uses transit frequently and has been previously in a wheelchair before, the Prop 400 veto is disgusting and an attack on people of disabilities. Light rail has been a lifesaver in ensure people of all types have independence. Ability 360 has unlocked so much accessibility, and that's right off the light rail. The lack of funding will hurt the independence of people who need it the most. My grandpa came to America at an old age, not to be able to drive, and lived at the Westward Ho, where he took the bus and light rail everywhere he went. He always lived happy and independent. Without transit funding, you are restricting the freedom of travel for everyone. Stop assuming everyone is physically able to drive. End comment. Mr. Chair, that ends Transportation Policy Committee public comments.
We have the comments for Regional Council, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 4 public comments for the Regional Council. I will begin with Krista Shepard of Phoenix, Arizona. Beginning of comment. Governor Ducey should not have vetoed HB 2685. I am in support of HB 2685 and am involved in many neighborhood and public meetings where others have also expressed support for HB 2685 to continue the tax. My request is for HB 2685 to move forward for voter ballot. End of comment. The next comment comes from Kenneth Steele of Chandler, Arizona. Beginning of comment. On behalf of Pinnacle Prevention, a nonprofit based in Chandler that works statewide to cultivate a just food system and opportunities for joyful movement, I am commenting to stress the importance of the continued half-cent sales tax to provide transportation options for residents to access food to feed their families and to move about their communities with joy. The proposed momentum plan included feedback from diverse communities that desire more transit options throughout the valley. As our region continues to grow and our economy continues to fluctuate, we need affordable and sustainable transportation options. We also support the new active transportation funding in the proposed plan. A newly released report from Smart Growth America last month puts the Phoenix metro area as the 22nd most dangerous metro area in the US. We had 681 pedestrian fatalities between 2016 and 2020. Our state leadership should also be concerned that Arizona is the fourth most deadly state for pedestrians in the nation. As we invest in walking and biking, we will not only create safer communities, we will also create healthier and more connected communities. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. End of comment. The next one is from Mr. Ryan Boyd of Phoenix, Arizona. Begin comment. Regarding the veto of the referral of our momentum plan to the ballot, we at the Urban Phoenix Project are frankly a little angry that transportation infrastructure in the valley is now threatened. While we would have written HB 2685 differently in the first place, this was a compromise and a rare unanimous compromise of leaders across our region. Transportation infrastructure requires us to build together despite our differences to connect all of our communities. I may never drive the Loop 303. I may never bike in Mesa, but we are all benefit from our communities having those options to get where we are going safely. Maricopa County voters deserve a chance to be heard and to vote for their future. We stand by as stakeholders and are willing and ready to engage to allow voters the choice to build a resilient transportation network where all options are viable. Please keep us and other community groups in mind as you proceed in this process. End of comment. The last comment is from Mr. Patrick McDaniel of Phoenix, Arizona. Begin comment. It is imperative MAG, Valley mayors, and community groups work together to counter the potentially disastrous consequences of the veto of HB 2685. Equitable and sustainable transit solutions, including light and commuter rail, are essential for economic growth in Maricopa County. As a daily user of light rail, I see the benefits of public transportation and know firsthand the potential impacts this veto could have. End of comment. Mr. Chair, that concludes all the comments.
Thank you for that. Item number 4 is the preliminary overview of potential project and program impacts regarding this veto. John, before you get started, I want to let everyone know, we sent out a letter 2 weeks ago to all legislators who supported us on this bill, thanking them for their support, letting them know that we are standing beside them as we move forward with this. I also want to take a minute and thank the intergovs who worked tirelessly on this and who will continue to work tirelessly on this. As mayors and elected officials, we don't always see how the sausage is made, right? We get pretty updates in a weekly update, phone calls, but we don't really always see what's going on behind the scenes. And the intergovs are the people who have really the ear of the legislature, our ears. They know what's happening, and their advice is invaluable, especially in times like this. I also want to take a minute and thank the MAG staff, Eric, John, Nathan, Audra, Amy. I know what you guys did to help make the sausage, and it does not go unnoticed. And we will rely on your expertise over the next few months to see what our next steps are, not only for regional council, but also for TPC. Chairman Seller, is there anything that you want to say on this?
No, thank you. I look forward to finding ways that we can move this forward as quickly as possible. It's critical.
Thank you. Eric?
Thank you very much. Microphone on. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Chairman Weiss, Chairman Sellers, members of the Regional Council and Transportation Policy Committee. This is certainly not the presentation I anticipated giving at this point in time, but here we are. This is a follow-up to an item that we have really has been the sole focus of both these bodies the last year, which is enabling legislation for the extension of Proposition 400. We had a bill that passed out of the legislature on June 24th. That bill would have authorized Maricopa County to go back to the voters, extend the tax for an additional 25 years. That bill was subsequently vetoed by Governor Ducey on July 6th. In response, the MAG Regional Council Executive Committee held a special meeting on July 8th to discuss a possible response to that veto and to start to chart the path forward. Today's presentation is a direct result from that meeting. One of the items that was requested is what are the potential impacts to both the existing Proposition 400 program as well as the future. Next slide, please. Really, I want to caution you though, we are only a couple weeks out from that veto itself. We have only been able to complete a preliminary overview. There's a lot more work to be done and a lot more conversations to be had. At this point, it's fair to say we have far more questions than we do answers. We are not looking for specific direction from you all today. Merely our intent is to provide you with the information so that in future meetings, we can start having more robust discussions and get direction about how to move forward. Next slide, please. So as part of today's conversation, I will first give an overview of both the sales tax itself, as well as the investment plan that was unanimously approved by the MAG Regional Council back in 2021. After that, I will then walk through preliminary impacts on our 3 modal programs, the arterial program, transit program, and freeway program, before concluding with next steps and what can be expected moving forward. Next slide, please. So I'll start first with background. Next slide, please. So part of the reason why we were so surprised by the veto is really because this dedicated investment, this sales tax has played such an integral role in the region for almost 40 years. It was first approved back by voters in 1985. Prior to that approval, a group of elected officials representing the cities, counties, towns, native nations across Maricopa County, in partnership with the business community, a similar group to that sitting around the table today, got together and recognized the need for investment in transportation. They recognized the role that that had in the future of this region, and really, decided that waiting 50 years for the Loop 101 was not acceptable. So they brought that forward to voters back in 1985. That approved. Voters again reaffirmed their commitment in 2004 with the extension of Proposition 400. And for the past 3 years, we've been discussing an extension to that initiative. Next slide, please. I cannot understate the importance of these investments. They have played a tremendous role in the life of all of our residents, certainly our economic prosperity. The map on the screen represents the high capacity transit network in this region before Proposition 300. We had I-17, we had a still uncompleted Interstate 10, and we had parts of US 60. Next slide, please. Fast forward with Proposition 300. It was that initiative that gave us the Loop 101, the Loop 202, State Route 51, and 143. Next slide, please. Then again, the voters continued to endorse that effort and pass Proposition 400 in 2004. As part of that, there was recognition that our region was maturing and we needed to expand our investments beyond the freeway network to multimodal investments. So as part of Proposition 400, we've been able to construct the Loop 303, Loop 202 South Mountain, widen existing facilities, build new interchanges, construct the high capacity transit network, the light rail network, construct over 250 miles of newer approved arterials. We fund more than 7.5 million miles of bus transit a year. The region provides funding in almost the entire amount of funding for ADA paratransit across the region. And there's significant investments that go into bicycle and pedestrian improvements, traffic signal technology to get people where they need to go faster, as well as air quality improvement mitigation strategies. Next slide, please. So why does it matter? There's no doubt that there's a direct link between transportation investments and economic development. These transportation investments have saved people time. They get people home to their families quicker. They save businesses time. Time means money. They create new jobs. They increase property values. Next slide, please. There's a lot of organizations that work to bring new businesses here to the community. There's no doubt that in addition to the population growth that we've seen, we've also seen economic growth. These organizations put our transportation network front and center when they are recruiting new businesses, and you see that where those businesses ultimately land. Next slide, please. The public gets it too. This is a plan, one of the themes that you'll hear throughout my presentation. This is a plan supported by the public, created by the public. with hours and hours of public engagement. The public understands the importance of transportation and the public supports transportation. During the initial stages of plan development, we undertook a values mapping activity where we reached out to members of the public. One of the comments that we continued to hear was an appreciation for a well-planned transportation network. They had no idea who did it, but they certainly support it. They appreciate and recognize how much benefit that brings to their lives every day, and they recognize and want to continue the investment. Our national consultant who did that work, quite honestly, was blown away by the level of support we saw in this region for extended transportation investments. So it wasn't surprising to us when we heard earlier this spring that support for the extension of Proposition 400 was north of 70%. That is unheard of nationally. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? Next slide. So we spent the last 2 or 3 years developing a very complex plan. We've done this through extensive technical analysis, significant public feedback, and ultimately you all have had some very tough conversations, have made trade-offs. Not everybody likes the plan, but it was about compromise. There is a tremendous need. When we started this effort, we identified more than $90 billion in need. One of the challenges we faced early on is that the legislature made it clear that they didn't want us to go above a half cent. So we listened as part of this. As part of that, we had to make more compromise and more tough decisions. We had to make a plan that included all revenues. We were very strategic about it, making decisions to make our dollars go further than they otherwise would. We have a plan that addresses future uncertainty. In total, we have a plan that supports $36.8 billion in investments. Next slide, please. Those investments support major capital projects such as State Route 30 between State Route 85 and I-17, reconstruction of I-17 itself, completion of State Route 24 in the Southeast Valley, expansion of our light rail system, construction of new bus rapid transit lines, and significant investments in arterial improvements. Next slide, please. The plan also includes a significant allocation to programs. This is our way to account for an uncertain future and to be able to respond to change. There's a significant increase in bus transit funding. This was the #1 thing that we heard back from residents as we initiated our public engagement. There's a significant demand across the entirety of the valley for additional bus transit service. We also included investments in safety, technology, intersection improvements, and arterial rehabilitation. We now have a lot of question marks regarding our future. Next slide, please. Really, our challenge is twofold. The entirety of the extension investment plan is at risk. All of those projects and programs in that plan are at risk. But there's also impacts to the approved program today. We have Proposition 400 in place. That tax extends through 2025, and we have approved projects and programs that could be impacted as a result of the veto. Today, I wanted to give a preliminary overview of what those potential impacts are. Next slide, please. First, in terms of looking at the extension, if we were to lose our dedicated half-cent sales tax, we would lose more than half of our total available revenue streams. That would completely decimate the plan. Of the revenue streams we do have left, most of them are restricted and can only be used for certain items. Further, a lot of our strategies to make our dollars go further would no longer be in place. We would be paying more for the same exact thing. It would have catastrophic consequences on our transportation system. Next slide, please. As I had mentioned, there are also impacts to the current program. You might ask yourself, why are there impacts to the current program if we have our approved funding stream in place and we have our approved set of projects and programs through 2025? And that's because of the complexity of transportation and transportation planning. This is a long lead time item. These projects take years and years to develop. So as we put the plans together, we do so with a mind towards the future. There are long lead time associated with much of it. So now we've moved into this time of uncertainty. We've been operating under the premise that the extension will be available. Many of these projects that we have in place are dependent on those future investments. And so how do we respond and react now? Ultimately, the hope is to avoid this last tier, which is a world in which we would not have a dedicated transportation sales tax. That would completely change our current program and completely change how we go about planning and building our regional transportation system. Next slide, please. So what are those impacts? I'll start first with the arterial program. So there's actually been a misconception about where the revenue shifts in this future plan are relative to what we did 20 years ago as part of Prop 400. The biggest single shift that you see is actually additional funding into the arterial and regional programs bucket. There's several reasons why. The first is to deal with the uncertainty. As I had mentioned, we don't quite know where the future is going to go, so we need to be nimble and be able to respond to that. It also reflects a changing need. Priorities grow as regions mature. No longer are we just dependent on additional freeway capacity. There are also quality of life factors at stake. We are a region that is seeing more density than we once had, and that requires different solutions. And then finally, this is really where you all, local agencies, see the pinch. Next slide, please. So what do I mean by that? So historically, the Highway User Revenue Fund, which includes the gas tax as well as a portion of vehicle license taxes, has been the largest revenue source to fund statewide transportation needs. You rewind 30 years or so, this by far was the biggest source. Well, the gas tax has not been increased since 1991. That revenue source has been less reliable. So the chart on the screen maps out two different items. First, it maps out total HERF collections for the entirety of the state, controlling for inflation. That's represented by the bars. The second item behind it, the big block, is the total state population. Next slide, please. So when you put it together, what you end up with is a situation where when you control for inflation, we have less in HERF revenues in 2021 than we did in 2000, and the state's population has grown by more than 40% over the same time. That puts an incredible strain on the state transportation network, and it certainly puts a huge strain on cities and agencies' transportation budgets. Next slide, please. We have more than $2 billion allocated towards arterial and regional improvements. There's no question that taking this out will have significant impacts. Agencies will be forced to do more with less. That will result in fewer new and widened roadways. That will limit our ability really to respond to economic development opportunities, all the new developments that are coming in. Think TSMC in the North Valley or the Intel expansion down in Chandler. Because the agencies will have to spread their local dollars further, their HERF dollars further, there will also be impact on the condition of local roadways. They will not be in as good of a shape as they are today. Next slide, please. As I had mentioned, there are a lot of open questions, and we're not looking for answers today. But these are questions that we'll have to wrestle with in the upcoming months. How should the region reposition its current Proposition 400 arterial program? What do we do with future federal formula revenue streams that we had originally tied to some of these future programs? How should we approach this uncertain future? In transportation terms, 3 years is not a lot of time. Next slide, please. Next, I'll move on to transit. And unfortunately, the picture does not get any better. So as we talk about transit in this region, it's funded through a combination of local, regional, and federal resources. As I had mentioned, there was significant demand on expanding the bus transit network as part of the plan development process. We saw that reflected in plan allocations. The total amount of sales tax allocated to bus transit has increased from Proposition 400 to our Proposition 400 extension investment plan. Not only does the veto risk that future expansion, but it also puts at risk transit service that's operating today. Next slide, please. So the map on the screen shows for last fiscal year, all the bus transit routes that were operating. Those shaded in blue were funded through a combination of local and regional resources. Those shaded in red were funded entirely by the region, and those shaded in gray were funded through local resources. Next slide, please. This is a similar map, except for express bus service. And again, those shaded in red, entirely regionally funded, blue, combination, and gray, locally funded. Next slide, please. So if we were not to extend the dedicated half-cent sales tax, that would have major impacts to the current bus transit network. All of the red that you see on the screen are routes that would be impacted or go away on January 1st, 2026 without a dedicated revenue stream. There is a lot of red on the screen. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, that map probably underestimates the total impact that the loss of the dedicated sales tax would have on transit. And that's because the region funds nearly the entirety of the federally required ADA paratransit costs. Without that dedicated regional sales tax, local agencies would be responsible for picking up those costs. They would then be faced with the decisions of either increasing local allocations to transit or scaling back transit service. Again, there would be significant impacts to transit service that's operating today. Next slide, please. Without an extension of Prop 400, we would also see impacts in future high-capacity transit projects. This is particularly dangerous when you think about some of the development activities that are ongoing today. We are seeing more infill than we once did. We are seeing greater densification. We are seeing increased demand for multifamily housing. All of those are perfect solutions for high-capacity transit. Without those projects, mobility would be impacted. Next slide, please. Again, there's a number of questions, and these are questions that the Valley Metro Board will have to wrestle with throughout the course of the year. How should the region approach bus transit moving forward? Should we continue with planned route extensions if we potentially have this funding cliff in 2026? How do we approach those high capacity transit corridors and some of the more local decisions associated there? Next slide, please. And finally, I want to end with potential impacts on the freeway program. Next slide, please. So this map on the screen shows our current approved program. It includes both projects funded as part of Prop 400, as well as those few projects that are funded through the extension of Prop 400 that are currently under development. Next slide, please. With an uncertain future, I think there's open questions about how we should respond to some of these projects. This map calls out a few of those. Should we continue to invest in the Loop 303 extension and the center section of State Route 30, when ultimately both of those projects are dependent on the extension of Prop 400? How do we approach those interchange improvements at I-10 and Baseline, projects that, in all honesty need built yesterday with this uncertainty that exists? I-10 is another perfect example. This is a tremendous project with significant statewide benefit. This project has gotten as far as it has today because of the region's initial investment. If we're potentially looking at a scenario where that investment goes away after 2025, is this where the region wants to continue placing its investment? Or should we look at projects that perhaps more complete the regional network? Next slide, please. In addition, all of those projects in the extension are at risk. There are a number of very important projects included in there. This map calls out a sampling of a few of them. Another item that this map does is also call out some of the current economic development centers. You have TSMC in the North Valley. You have the massive growth occurring along the Loop 303 in the Southwest Valley. You have the Price Road investments down in Chandler. You have the Gateway improvements down in the Southeast Valley. This doesn't even include the whole State Route 30 corridor, which has seen massive growth of its own. All these projects will be at risk. Next slide, please. In addition, another item that we've been discussing at length at the Transportation Policy Committee is our current freeway pavement condition. As we've noted, the current rubberized asphalt is aging, And once that starts to go, it goes very quickly. We can expect over the next couple of years, we will have a number of areas throughout the regional system start to deteriorate. One of our solutions was to program $750 million as part of the extension of Prop 400. This was a particular line item that we saw an opportunity to advance, accelerate with a successful vote by the voters. We could jumpstart some of these projects. Those activities will now have to wait, and there certainly will be impacts seen throughout the regional freeway system. Next slide, please. Just to emphasize, the future of freeways in Maricopa County without the extension of a dedicated half-cent transportation sales tax is very bleak. There would not be funding necessary to build new freeways. There would be very limited to no freeway widening. There would be limited to no new freeway interchanges. We would be in the position that much of greater Arizona is already in today. If you look at the statewide program, you see very few of these type of projects. The only reason we've been able to enjoy the success in Maricopa County is because of our dedicated sales tax. Next slide, please. One of the questions we've been asked frequently over the last couple of weeks is, without a potential extension of Proposition 400, could we leverage new infrastructure dollars to still move forward with some of these projects? Could we leverage state appropriations to move forward with them? And while those are solutions that would incrementally help, the short answer to that question is no. And I want to walk you through an example and really put into context the challenge that we would have before us. So if you consider the Loop 303 extension south and just the center segment of State Route 30, so again, this is just the portion between Loop 303 and Loop 202, the total cost to build those facilities is $2.5 billion. Next slide, please. To put that into context, that $2.5 billion is equal to the entire 25-year allocation of highway user revenue funds into our regional freeway program. It would eat up the entirety of that amount. In addition, if you look at federal discretionary opportunities, the most likely grant program would be the MEGA program. And while there has been significant increases in federal transportation dollars, if you look at this program, there's $1 billion available across the entirety of the nation. Of that amount, half of it is available for projects of this size. And then further considered to be competitive, the federal government usually looks at the local contribution in a project. Less than 40% federal contribution is considered to be competitive. Without the dedicated sales tax, there is no way we could get to those numbers. And then finally, in terms of state appropriations, while we're certainly grateful for the state legislature for appropriating additional funding into transportation, it wouldn't be enough to build a facility of this size. Take, for example, the most successful state, arguably the most successful state appropriation this last year, Interstate 10. Think about the capital that it took to get that project across the finish line. That was singled out by the governor as part of a state of the state speech. It is a project of demonstrable statewide importance, and it still took a lot of political capital just to get 400 million. 400 million is not nearly enough to build that $2.5 billion facility. Next slide, please. So there are a lot of open questions. How should we reposition and reprioritize projects as part of the current freeway program? Should we continue to proceed with some of these preliminary development activities now that we have this uncertainty? With the freeway program, some of these are a little more time sensitive than others. And so I wanted to take some time today to walk through some preliminary ideas. Next slide, please. So first with State Route 30. As a reminder, as part of our approved Proposition 400 program, we have more than $500 million set aside for right-of-way acquisition and advanced utility work. We also have been working with ADOT to initiate final design on the first component of that project from 97th Avenue over to Loop 202. So in light of the veto, what we're proposing is some fairly modest steps that are reflective of our current reality. So with right-of-way, ADOT has encumbered a lot of that money. We propose that ADOT continue to move forward with those right-of-way acquisitions, continue to exhaust that funding. However, we hold back on additional allocations until we have more certainty for the future. We do anticipate that this will have fairly moderate impacts on the overall project development. Next, with the utility work, as we've talked about before, this is extremely time-sensitive work. There's no making up for lost time. We do recommend that ADOT continue to proceed forward with that utility work. And finally, with the final design, we recommend that ADOT put that on hold. They keep the funding available in fiscal year 2023, so that as soon as we do have a successful path forward, we can initiate that quickly, but feel it's prudent to hold off on that $35 million investment until there is more certainty. Next slide, please. I do also want to call out the impact of the veto because it is real. And I think State Route 30 does a really good job of illustrating that. Given some of the nuances of transportation planning and programming, there will be an impact in the project schedule. Currently, we're anticipating a minimum of a 2-year delay. That has real funding consequences. A 2-year delay with 7% inflation adds $300 million to that project alone. So certainly if you look system-wide, that number is only going to grow. Next slide, please. With the Loop 303 extension south, that project is currently in final design. We propose we continue to move forward with that final design. We do not have construction programmed until 2025, so fortunately there will be more certainty at that time. Next slide, please. As for Interstate 10, as I had mentioned, this is a critical project. It's a very important project, and the region has more than 220 million set aside for this project. Just to emphasize, it's the regional allocation that really has gotten this project to where it's at today. The state was able to leverage those dollars into the successful appropriation. However, it still requires fairly significant investment from the federal government. We're still awaiting the results of that grant application, and we propose that we continue to move forward with project development activities and reassess once that application is known. Next slide, please. And then finally, with the 2 interchanges, these are work that has already been initiated. As I had mentioned, these are critically important interchanges. Traffic is backing up today. It has mainline impacts. We propose that we continue with that preliminary design and scoping efforts. And by the time that finishes, we'll have more clarity about what our future holds and can make a more informed decision at that point. Next slide, please. Finally, we're faced with a number of questions about the state appropriations that came through. Again, just to emphasize, I think we're grateful for the state legislature for those investments. However, nearly all of them are contingent in one way, shape, or form on the extension of Proposition 400. Some projects are more directly impacted than others. Next slide, please. But additional time is really needed to work in cooperation with ADOT, understand the impacts and understand perhaps a logical sequencing of when we can roll those projects out. Needless to say, I think it'll be prudent to take a conservative approach, and this is something that we'll certainly revisit with all of you later. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps and key takeaways? Where do we go from here? Well, there's a lot more work to be done. As I had mentioned, this is just based on 2 or 3 weeks worth of analysis. Far more deeper dives are needed. Far more conversation with you all is needed. But rest assured that work has been initiated. A couple of the other items that we're working on, as requested by the regional council, doing a more formalized economic assessment of the extension, doing a more formalized assessment of what the impacts of the delay are and of further delay that will hopefully help with some of our messaging. Next slide, please. We want to continue to work closely with member agencies, implementing partners, and really where we need all of you. One of the big asks of you all today is that we need to continue to educate. We need to continue to educate business groups. We need to continue to educate the community. One of our biggest challenges is that I just spent the last 30 minutes articulating to you all of the challenges that we face back in Proposition 300 and really with Proposition 400. It was far more in your face. There were still uncompleted sections of the freeway. People could taste it, they could feel it, they knew what it meant. in this case, it's not so obvious. However, that cliff is every bit as steep as it was back then, and we need to make sure we get that message out. Next slide, please. So at the end of the day, this does set us back. There are consequences, and there are lots of questions. However, that can be overcome. There is still time to fix it. We did spend a lot of time on the plan. It is extremely complex. It is extremely interwoven. You can't piece out one piece or the other without a ripple effect. And really, at the end of the day, the plan reflects what the public wants. And while we need to get it through the legislature, it's ultimately the public who's going to endorse or not endorse this plan. And we need to keep that in mind. So it's more critical than ever that we be unified in our support of the plan and unified in our pursuit to get back to the voters as quickly as possible. So Chairman Weiss, that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
John's budgeted time for this in the beginning was like 5 minutes. So I'll tell you how important this was.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Mayor Pizzol, give me a second here on this one. As we go forward, we're not going to decide anything today, folks, right? Staff still has to do their work on this and their diligence on this and get us back more details and more items. And John hit on that more than one time. I think as an organization, and Jack, it's going to start in TPC, but I think we need to look at what is our first step in this. There has been some talk that the governor would be willing to look at a special session before the end of the year, depending on what this looked like coming back to him. I think we need to get an idea going forward of how many bites of the apple do we have between now and 2025. What does that look like? What does this plan look like? And while we talk about this plan staying in place, let's be very honest with each other. This plan had heartache for a significant group of legislators. And the makeup of the legislature is not going to get any more friendly to cities after November. And potentially the governor may not be more friendly to cities going forward, depending on who it is. So I think the organizations, TPC and regional council, really have to look at this plan and go, okay, what are we willing to compromise on, if anything? And where do we go with this? And kind of what are the options that we have? And I think there's going to be, I know you and Audra, I know a lot of work went into this. And I know this has been kept you awake at nighttime. I'm gonna tell you that you've got many more months of sleepless nights as we go forward with this. My style is to keep it really free flowing. So I want to start with Mayor Pizzillo, but if anybody's on the line, let's take people on the line as they pop up. But Mayor Pizzillo, I know you had some comments on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, great presentation, okay? And it highlights what we've got in front of us. But I'd like to first thank you and to my fellow mayors, MAG staff, and our legislative champions, as well as our city staff who worked hard and long hours putting this together, who fought to get this Prop 400 extension on the governor's desk. Unfortunately, what I don't think a lot of folks understand, with the exception of those around this table and our staff, is the devastating impact the governor's veto will have on the development, growth, prosperity of the region, as well as the domino effect of the entire state. And I emphasize the entire state. I would like to request MAG staff to look into making a much more proactive and ongoing course of action to inform the public, our legislators, and the governor's office about the benefits of having Prop 400 over the past 20 years, in addition to the impact of the governor's veto, long-term and short-term. The ongoing education campaign can look in many ways, but one possible route is through targeted and consistent social media efforts and regular engagement with our legislators, focusing on hard facts that you have here and numbers to emphasize why this is so important, because simply saying it is does not make it so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Chairman Sellers?
You know, I can't tell you how many calls I got within an hour of the veto, an absolute barrage of people saying, what happened? And I didn't really have an explanation. I guess I was as surprised as anybody. But what's important to me at this point is that we not look for people to blame or issues to blame it on, but rather ask ourselves, what do we need to do to market this successfully? And as you mentioned, we had 70% polling of the public for this. So we're doing a good job of communicating to the public on the need and the benefit. I think that tells us who our main audience should be as we develop a plan that better addresses what it takes to get it through our legislature.
Chairman Sellers, thank you for that. I would tell you that I don't think any of us in this room, my hope is that in this room and online are looking to point fingers at anyone. I think though what we have to do is look at what our strategy has been and say, okay, how do we improve on that? What do we need to change on that? How does our approach need to change? Was this a one-off thing with the governor that, sorry for my language, that got pissed off at someone and decided to veto this? I don't think we really truly know the answer to that. So I think we need to kind of dig deeper into that. What I don't want to have this organization do for the next 6 months, a year and a half, is bang our head against the wall and come up with the same result, right? Fighting a difficult legislature, fighting a difficult governor, and being right where we're at today, disappointed. So I think there's got to be an assessment of where we go from here and what missteps might have been done. And I don't think there were missteps on our part. I think there's just our messaging didn't get through. And what is that? Do we have to change our messaging?
Well, and one more thing I'll add to that is I think part of the problem is that the people that vetoed this don't understand that transportation infrastructure planning is a long-term plan, that you have to have dedicated funding before you can have a plan in place. And so saying that we don't have to really have a new bill in place or an extension in place until 2025 does not understand how this works.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Harkey?
Thank you, Chair. You'd mentioned something I just wanted clarity on. Did you say that the governor was possibly interested in reopening this session?
I think there's been some discussion on the governor's and when it comes to education funding and kind of through the grapevine, and rumors are one of those great things that you never know. But I would think that the governor may want to look at a special session on this transportation bill before his term ends.
Okay.
Now, Doug and I are not on first name basis or first. He doesn't call me every night. But I think we should look at all possibilities. And if he's open to that discussion, what do we need to do to get that done? And I'm not saying kowtow to the governor. What I'm saying is to have an open and honest discussion of where we need to go.
I would certainly welcome that. I agree with you, the assessment. I know I've talked to at least one gubernatorial candidate that's expressed great interest in passing this, but I don't know about our legislators getting there. Mayor Gallego had mentioned previously several times, do we need to re-look at this to get this past the finish line? And I don't know what all that means either at this point, but if there are some ways that can overcome a governor's veto on this, I would certainly hope that we would at least explore that and see if there is a way to override that veto and bring this back to the voters at a frequent time, rather than just saying our next best path is waiting for 2 more years for this.
And Kevin, I would tell you, I don't think anybody in this room agrees that time is on our side. Mayor Carlott?
Yes, even though that presentation, thank you, it was thorough and wonderful, but it was extremely depressing. Even though we all feel, the burden of transportation on our shoulders, we can't forget the fact that we were successful. We did get this through our legislature. So we have to remember that. I don't think that we did everything wrong. And I don't think that, we weren't able to market our plan correctly. I always say if something doesn't make sense, it must be political. So I think that the reason that Governor Ducey vetoed this really is not about our plan. It's not about transportation. I think that it was something inexplicable at this time. And I don't see him bringing this back for a special session at all. But I completely agree with Mayor Pizzillo. Say it.
Pizzillo.
Pizzillo. It's Irish.
It's Irish.
Okay, thank you. Pizzillo. That we do need to begin an education plan now. And no matter how long that takes before we can come back before our legislature, I think that we should begin that right away and be very, very strong and strategic about that plan. And I completely agree that next session is not going to get easier for us. I think it's going to be much more difficult. So we need to hold on to our champions as much as we can. But I just wanted to say that just remember, we didn't fail. We did not fail at this. And I think that we've got to just continue to look forward in ways that keep our plan together. I think we came up with a good plan, a good solid plan. And I don't think we need to reinvent that wheel.
And I'll just add to that, that many of the calls I got after the veto were from legislators asking me what happened.
Thank you, Mayor Carlett. Mayor Daniels, and I'm still going to call you Mayor Daniels. Nothing? Sorry, Mayor Peterson.
I always have something to say, especially when it comes to transportation. I do think a postmortem of opportunities lost over the last 6 months would be a beneficial. I don't know that this is the format for that. But I do believe that there needs to be an honest, introspective assessment of where we can make some shifts and changes. One of the things, if you'll go back one slide for me, John, I think it was one more, that one. One of the things that I don't see in there, although I do see educate the public and stakeholders, is build relationships. That is going to be a key component. And there have been lots of shifts, whether it be in the governor's office or new appointees to the legislature over the last year, as so many people resigned. We've got to do a better job, both as individuals contributing to this effort, as well as the agency, to sincerely build relationships. One of the things it's been obvious to me is my voice isn't always the best voice for the message. My ego tells me otherwise sometimes, but it's really important that the right person with the right voice is the one that carries the message. And so we can go out and educate on how awesome this plan is or how unified we were. But if it's not coming out of the right mouth, it's not necessarily accepted. And so I really want us to and perhaps that's a MAG internal conversation. And then one of the other things I want to make sure we do before we go roll out the exact same plan again is I heard sort of post us voting on this plan that there was some frustration amongst some of other agencies that they weren't included or felt like their voice wasn't heard as part of the conversation. And so I would just urge us to really take some extra time to meet with the different agencies, Valley Metro, with ADOT, with the business community. I know that, and I'm pointing at you, Dave, but Truckers Association had some concerns after it was already out of the gate, and some other things. So we really need to do some additional outreach before we just package up the same plan and present again. So those are some of my initial thoughts, but I have so many opinions and zero authority at this point in
We're
my
going to hold a
life.
special meeting just for that.
Thank you for the time.
No, again, this meeting, we're not going to solve the issue and get to the answer of what happened. As mayors, as council members, we've all been part of a process where we've put together a plan for our residents in our individual cities. We've put together a bond. We've put together a sales tax initiative. We put together something, and we think it's the greatest plan in the world, and why wouldn't they vote for it? And we think we make our case, and they go to the ballot box and they vote no. It's because we misunderstood what they were looking for. We assumed we thought what they were looking for. We thought we gave them all the information, and the truth is we didn't get to the heart of the matter. And that's what we're not talking about that with the public. I have no doubt if the governor hadn't vetoed this and this went to the public, this would pass. But there's 3 steps we have to get through, and we didn't succeed on the second one. So Mayor Ortega.
Thank you. With all that's been said, I'm in agreement. I don't want to repeat, but my takeaway generally for taxes and obligations is that we operate on need, not want. And the needs of our business world, of our institutions, whether it's getting to school on time or getting to your job on time, those are needs, not wants. And I believe that we can and should apply whatever additional pressure so that our needs are not in jeopardy. And that at this point we are in jeopardy. It starts to question our bond rating, our why major international companies come to the Valley, and the expectations that we expect as from government. So I'm share the concern expressed here. I think that there is a pathway probably for an additional session, but it has to be emphasized that these are, as we heard about disabilities and other means to get the job done. We have to continue to promote our well-being.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Wires?
Yeah, I was disappointed, am disappointed. One of the things that we identified and we told everybody very early on is what the legislature told us that they would accept and what they wouldn't accept. And we attacked and planned and lobbied with those things in mind, along with the county supervisors saying, these are the things that we'll do, these are the things we won't do. And we went in with that. But I never once heard anybody ever say, what's the governor going to do? What's the governor want? What's he expect? Never heard that discussion from anybody, including myself. And I think that we really missed the boat on that one. I think we should have started with the governor and then went backwards. I think we really missed that big time. It doesn't mean that you give the governor what they want, but you better figure out what he's willing to sign. Or we waste an awful lot of effort and an awful lot of time. I don't think anybody in this room other than John and myself spent more time down there lobbying legislators. I'm not upset with our legislators at all. In fact, I think we did very, very well on the west side. I think we had only 2 of all of our legislators that voted against it. I'm happy with what we got out of the west side, but it's going to take everybody. And I think that I think if there's an opportunity to talk to the governor right now, I think we need to do that and find out what he would be willing to do to see if that's even an option for us.
Thank you, Mayor. Les?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think I'm agreeing with a lot that's been said here today. I look at it and I say over 70%, when we talk about targeting and getting our message out, over 70% of the residents are in favor of it. If you look at the legislature, over 60% of the legislature voted for it. And I agree with Chairman Sellers that what we have is a communication problem with the governor, because I don't believe he understands the magnitude of what he just did. And I think that getting together with the other agencies who have a vested interest in this, if there's any opportunity to go back now, because I think the water is going to get deeper and more turbulent in the future, that we should mount it and get out there quickly with and if it requires us to modify, I don't know if we have to go back to the legislature if we do any kind of modifications. That's a question. But I think that we should be moving quickly because this is a very important matter.
Les, thank you. Mayor Giles.
Thank you. I will echo the gratitude for the presentation that was given today. I thought this meeting was important. This joint meeting was important so that we could, again, begin the process of debunking a false narrative that has been put up against this plan, which is that there is not a sense of urgency, that it's okay. We have till 2025, everybody relax. There's all of that is I'll use a specific term, that's BS. And Phil, you fill in the blanks there. So we need to have a communication plan that very specifically explains the consequences of this veto, and that's what I'm talking about. So and very conservatively, the damages of what this veto has inflicted on all of us is measured in the hundreds of millions of dollars, probably more accurately in the billions of dollars. So we need to correct that wrong message that there isn't an urgency, that there are not dire consequences that resulted from this. And at a minimum, right-of-way, design work, federal grants, bonding, many of our most successful economic development projects are now in jeopardy. It's hard to overstate the negative consequences. So that message needs to be clear. The fact that you can't completely stop momentum on transportation infrastructure for 2 years and have that not be a catastrophic event in your region, that has to be clearly communicated, because there are those who are poo-pooing that message and they need to be corrected. I think what went wrong here, frankly, is just a monumental failure of leadership in the governor's office. It's not any more complicated than that. But I think that we need to, the strength of our position coming into this was we went with as a united body. We had this unheard of momentum, not, no pun intended, of having a unanimous vote at TPC and at regional council. We can't let that fracture now. That needs to continue to be our posture going forward. That is the strength of us. So I think it's very premature to talk about compromise or what we can do to, put Humpty Dumpty back together again at this point. I think it is important that we do have an all hands on deck analysis of what should happen going forward. And we need to look at some very innovative things. Of course, legislative solutions, legal solutions, all of those things are on the table. But I think that it's probably premature to discuss those in detail at this point. We will know more a week from today after the primary elections, and we have to be very strategic and very wise in the strategies that we adopt. But I think what's important today is that we vote on this resolution, that we send a unified message as a body, that this is not less important, that we are not wounded, that we are more committed, if anything, going forward. I'm particularly glad that we have our TPC partners with us here today, because the one thing that is very clear to me is that going forward, the involvement of the business community is going to be even more important than we realized. That is how we're going to get this over the finish line. We've all learned a painful lesson of the political capital that we have as local elected officials. So the business community, if you thought this was a 10 before, it's now an 11. We need you in the room. We need your checkbooks in the room. We need your clout in the room. That, I think, is the secret sauce that's going to ultimately prove successful.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Orgeborn?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. I'll echo everything everybody else has said. I have a question, though. What is I mean, assuming there's not a special session, I don't know the ins and outs of that, but if we start up the plan again next year, what's the process? Do we begin from square one, take it through the TPC, through MAG, and then through the legislative process again to the governor's desk?
Chairman Weiss, members of the Regional Council Transportation Policy Committee. So, I think just a couple of reminders. Plan development process is lengthy. I took years to sort of work through a solution there. My perspective is that it's going to take a very long time. At the end of the day, however, we are in an air quality non-attainment area. Whatever we do have planned for the future does have to go through a formal process. It does have required formal engagement, and ultimately it does have to go through that formal air quality analysis process and evaluation to make sure that we're in conformance.
And Eric, let me just tell me if I'm wrong. I think though for this body, John, is do we run, if TPC and regional council decides whatever they decide, but let's say they decide that HB 2685 was the plan that we want to run in 23. Okay, or before legislature. Are we starting from scratch? Or are we going back to a vote of TPC, a vote of regional council, the legislature, and going from there? And are we looking at doing in the legislature's vote, they authorized an election in March of 23. I mean, I'm looking at with a special session, we would have 3 bites at the apple. Again, whether a special session happens, I don't know. But at least we have 2 bites at the apple. What is that process if we're looking at something in 23? Is it what I just laid out?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of Regional Council and Transportation Policy Committee. So I'll give you a little bit more ambiguous an answer as you're probably hoping for, and it all depends. I think it depends on what our likely path forward is, how much implications part of the challenge of the whole planning process is that there's so much variability involved, right? So we have revenue projections that are at a certain point in time. We have cost estimates that change. We have project needs that are changed. All these projects are evolving today, right? And so I think, we have a current commitment to the plan from a staff level. Do we feel confident that, if we have an election in 2023, the plan that we just approved is satisfactory, provide us the guidance we needed to implement? Absolutely, no question. I think it's when, if we were to drag that out longer, that's really where you start to move down into those different planning tiers and you have more and more uncertainty building. So the answer to the question is, the more certainty we have in the near term, the better. The longer we wait, the more it puts things in jeopardy.
It depends the answer you're looking for. Ginny?
That's what I figured.
Just wanted to say that not to be pointing fingers, but to know why it failed, and to what Mayor Carlott said and Mayor Giles, if you go to trying to figure out about the veto itself, that is what needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. And if it is because he was mad at somebody, that sort of goes along, with not changing too much about what we have here. But if we look at his veto message and take what he said and think, okay, we have to address that, then that's a little bit of a different story. But if we really think it just all came down to one day and one decision, that is a different strategy. But that's the one that we can do as quickly as possible. Find out what he really needs or wants or such to move it forward. To go back to all of this work, except for some of those variables that you mentioned, I don't see the reason to do that necessarily, because that took forever.
Years.
And we got to where we got, which was a successful effort.
Jen?
I just feel like we need really clear timeline expectations. I recognize everything depends, but from where I calculate elections and things like that, there is no way feasibly this goes in spring of 2023 at the earliest. And if we moved incredibly quickly, we could meet a November 2023, but there's no calendar that allows us to meet a March. So I just think we need to sort of wrap our heads around. It's either going to be November 2023 or thereafter. That's the it depends part, right?
Nice. Okay. Andrea, anybody online? Mayor Schoaf, did you want to say something? Okay. Was anybody online who raised their hand? Mayor Gallego.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think I'll start where Mayor Carlott and Mayor Wires did with thanking the legislators who voted for this. It very well could have been the most important jobs bill they ever voted for. And that is exciting. And we shouldn't let that get passed. It would be more satisfying if it were implemented, but still shows good leadership and an important investment in our future. If we are going to do more stakeholder engagement, I think it's important to be broad and also look to the electorate. So for us, when we have done a few transportation elections in Phoenix, philanthropy, community or nonprofits have all been at the table as well and have helped broaden the message and make sure we got to the voters who ultimately are the most important decision makers. And as we look to any decisions we make, we have multiple bars, but the most important one is what the voters will support. And so we have to keep that in mind and what they would like to see. And we have data about certain areas. There are certain constituencies that are persuadable. There are certain constituencies that are never going to vote for a tax extension. And there are groups that will be with us, but we ought to, any changes we make will change who that coalition is. I think we will be getting more information at the MAG level, and there's a variety of different options out there. I understand we have legal research ongoing about several different paths forward, including an initiative. We would not be the first regional jurisdiction to originally think that they were going to go with a referral and then move towards an initiative. So we just have to understand what the options are as we move forward, but keep our eye on how important this is and what a difference it will make for people spending more time with their family. What will happen to traffic and commutes if this does not move forward? And I hope we can always keep our residents really at the forefront when we make these decisions.
Thank you, Mayor. So it sounds like going forward, we'd like to have kind of an analysis of like we understand the governor, but what was the heartburn issue for him? Was it one individual thing? Was it the things that Mayor Dickey has laid out when we look at his letter? That probably shouldn't take, I wouldn't think, longer than 30 days. I think then going forward, coming back to TPC first, and then regional council is, what are our timeline options? Is there a viability of a special session? What would that take? Again, I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but what does a November 23 election look like? What does a November 24 election look like? And kind of where do we go from there? And what changes in this plan when it comes to the dollar amounts? As we delay, the costs go up. What does that look like? And as it looks like, the sales tax dollars may not change, but the cost of construction does. What plans now shrink or get pushed back? Or am I hearing it right from the committees? Are we on all kind of the same page? All right, I heard nodding and winks. John, any questions, or Eric on that? All right, thank you, everyone. Mayor Chairman Sellers, anything for you, sir? Is that it? Right. Item number 5 is the resolution. There's a copy of the resolution that I'm going to read. It is a generic resolution. It was meant to be put out there so we'd have a structure to build off of. And I think for these two organizations, there's 2 tacks that we take. One is that we look at the resolution as a way of portraying our message, showing how important this is, and a willingness to work together. Or there's the message that comes out and says, we can't believe you did this. Oh my gosh, what were you thinking? So I think as an organization, 2 organizations, we kind of need to look at that. So let me read the resolution. It's up on the screen, but if your eyes are as bad as mine, you're never going to be able to see that. Resolution in response to the governor's veto of HB 2685. Whereas through a unanimous vote of the Transportation Policy Committee and MAG Regional Council, a forward-focused, balanced, and fiscally responsible 25-year transportation plan was approved in 2021 that required approval of Maricopa County voters to extend the longstanding half-cent transportation sales tax. And whereas the extension of the tax would have enabled a plan supported by elected officials representing all the cities, counties, towns, and native nations in the region, and that was forged through compromise, through discussion, and countless hours of input from the public and stakeholders. And whereas bipartisan legislation was introduced in the 55th Arizona Legislature, second regular session that proposed to authorize Maricopa County voters to exercise their choice of whether to extend the existing half-cent transportation sales tax. And whereas HB 2685 would have allowed the voters of Maricopa County a choice to continue the important legacy of transportation investment that first began nearly 40 years ago with the passage of Prop 300 in 1985 and subsequent extensions with Prop 400 in 2004. And whereas the dedicated half-cent sales tax is responsible for Maricopa County's world-class transportation system that has created economic prosperity for the region and state and has greatly improved the quality of life for its residents. And whereas Maricopa County is the only county in Arizona required to seek legislative approval for such a measure being put before voters. And whereas on June 24th, 2022, the Arizona State Legislature passed HB 2685 legislation authorizing Maricopa County to place on a March 2023 ballot the consideration of the continuation of the dedicated half-cent sales tax. And whereas this critical legislation was vetoed by the governor, effectively denying Maricopa County voters the opportunity to decide the region's future transportation investments and corresponding benefits on the economy and quality of life. And whereas the impacts of the veto are generational and will slow development so critically important projects as State Route 30 in the Southwest Valley, State Route 24 in the Southeast Valley, and many other road and highway projects, risk ongoing bus transit and paratransit service, and jeopardize the economic vitality of our state. Be it resolved that the members of the MAG Regional Council express our renewed commitment to seek voter approval as soon as possible in order to grow and maintain our region's world-class transportation system for future generations, whether it's passed and adopted by the MAG Regional Council on the 27th day of July, 2022. This is an action item. We will be voting on something, whether it's this, whether it's a version of this. So any input from members would be greatly appreciated. Chairman.
Unless there are comments, I would be ready to entertain a motion from the Transportation Policy Committee to recommend approval of the resolution in response to the veto of HB 2685.
I make a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I have a thought here, and maybe I'm not the appropriate person to make this comment or make a motion accordingly, but I'm going to take up where Mayor Giles left off and his needing all hands on deck. And this This is a resolution of the council. I'm not a member of the council, so I'm probably not the appropriate person to make a motion, but I would be happy to make a motion along these lines. I think it would make sense to have this be a motion, a resolution passed by the council and the TPC. So, and I'd be happy to make a motion accordingly, but I think we could amend this in two places after the words MAG Regional Council and Transportation Policy Committee to make it a joint resolution. Just my thought. It may be a bad idea. It may be inappropriate procedurally, but that's my.
And sir, before I forget, I did miss one item. This is open to the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this issue? Seeing none. Sorry, sir. Eric?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the Regional Council and Transportation Policy Committee. So the normal practice, and obviously this is maybe not a normal time, but the Transportation Policy Committee makes recommendations to the Regional Council for action. And so the way we structure the agenda today is the Transportation Policy Committee is actually would make the recommendation to the Regional Council to approve the resolution, which is why it's structured this way. Now, this committee has the ability to modify this any way you'd like, but that's typically our practice.
And Eric, and I would tell you, and Chairman Sellers, we've always relied on the TPC going forward. So I think that your committee should take the lead, and then Regional Council can comment and go back and forth on this. But I would tell you that we'll kind of go from there. But I think TPC should take the lead on this.
Okay. I have a motion from Mayor Osborne. Do I have a second? I have a second from Rock Arnett. Any other comments? Okay. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room on the Transportation Policy Committee? If you're in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No. I'll
Okay.
explain my vote. I think in light of what we said in the earlier part of doing a little bit of a debrief, I would prefer to wait to do the resolution.
Okay. We have a majority of ayes with one nay.
Chair Sellers, I just have to get a vote from everybody participating virtually that is a member of the TPC.
Okay, thank you.
When I call your name, please indicate your vote. Doug DeCluson. Charles Humantle. Jackie Meck.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson.
Nay.
Thank you. Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair, I have 2 nays and the rest ayes.
Okay, that motion passes with a majority vote.
Thank you, Chairman Sellers. We have a recommended resolution from the TPC. Are there any members of Regional Council who'd like to comment on that recommendation?
Just
Mayor Worsborn.
Yes, sir. Just a question, and I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for in the resolution moving forward, but would it be appropriate to do this resolution and then something maybe that is a follow-up that's maybe more strongly worded, or I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for? Okay. Okay.
And then just for clarification, and we can use the recommended resolution, or as a council, we can add verbiage that we feel is necessary and go from there. Again, while it's pretty and it's up on the screen and it's here, it doesn't mean that it can't be redone. So while we appreciate TPC on this, Regional Council, is there anybody who'd like to amend this, look at this, say, delay it? Kind of go down the line. And I do this with my council, so hopefully. Kevin, any issues with this? Jeff? Skip? Any issues?
The wording about unanimous. It says unanimous vote,
That was the original vote for Regional Council back in.
but it says of the Transportation Policy Committee and MAG Regional.
Again, that was 6 months
Original.
Oh,
Says in
that was on the bill.
All
Yeah,
right.
Yep.
But we want the resolution even if we've got 2 nays. Okay,
Yep. Kathy?
okay.
Yeah, just for clarification on that, the reference in the resolution is to the vote that was made
Gotcha.
in the original.
Okay, thank you.
On the sixth, whereas, I would just suggest that there might be something to the effect of what Mayor Gallego said, that the MAG is appreciative of the legislatures who voted in support of this for the well-being of the city, of the state. So it says legislators passed. I think we should reinforce those allies as, and of course, we have built our case. So whereas this critical legislation, I would probably add something like that, strongly supported by the Arizona legislature. It would be what I'd probably add to that, to emphasize that it was not a close call. It was,
Right. We didn't squeak by is what you're saying.
right.
Right. Joe? Jerry?
The last whereas, one thing that I did not like about that is we're calling out 2 special projects when every project we have is all critically important. I just didn't like that because it almost has the appearance that if these 2 got done, we'd be okay. The other ones aren't as critical. They're important to everyone.
Sure.
So I just wish that those 2 items weren't brought in there and it was all transportation projects or equally in critically.
How about something along across the entire region? Something along that line, projects across the entire region?
That would be my.
Okay. John?
I'm in favor of moving forward with the recommendations of TPC right now, and I'll make that motion. I think it's just going to take us too long if we start wordsmithing everywhere as we got to move out of this meeting. So I don't disagree with anything that's been said. I mean, certainly we could punch it up or water it down, but just for the sake of marching forward, I move for approval of TPC's recommendation.
That's we good. We have a first and a second. Do you want to call the vote or do you want to wait for more comment?
Perhaps we finish.
Yep, we can.
If we finish the comments, I agree with what John is saying. My question is, where does this go? Are you going to hand deliver it to the governor? Once we do a resolution, do we put it in our file or do we go down and say more to come?
Eric?
Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the Regional Council and Transportation Policy Committee, I think this is designed to be a statement from the Regional Council expressing the sentiment of this group. And so it can certainly be sent to the governor, it can be sent, this meeting is being covered by the press also. So I think this succinctly kind of puts the arguments together in one form in a relatively positive manner, quite frankly. So that's the purpose of this. So it wasn't designed to go to any specific person or entity.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think Les has got a good point though. How is it delivered? I think if it just goes in the mail and one of his staff gets it and whatever, I mean, don't you think it's important that somebody hand delivers this to the governor?
I will do that.
Okay,
Do I have to wear a tie?
good.
I would.
I wore a tie today because of Mayor Giles. So there we go. All right. No. Yes, I will deliver it to the governor. Him and I are really good terms. It'll be perfect. Mayor Gallego. Mayor Orsborn.
Nothing further.
Mayor Dickey. Or Mayor Daniels. TPC's already voted. Julia? Rocks TPC. Mayor Peterson online?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I voted against the TPC version of this resolution before we had this full discussion because I'm not quite at the position where I can fully agree with everything that's in here. And I was also concerned with what or how this resolution was going to be used. And I appreciate that question was just asked before we got to vote for the MAG council. But I couldn't hear whoever spoke right before Mayor Giles. They said quite a bit and you agreed with several of the items, but I don't think their microphone was on. So online, we couldn't hear that person. And I would like to know who that was and what they were discussing if possible before we move forward.
Mayor Peterson, that was Mayor Wires, if I'm remembering this correctly. And his only issue was where it listed State Route 30 and State Route 24. His feeling was that just because those two projects were listed doesn't mean that the rest of the projects were not important. And he would recommend removal of those, and maybe have wording in there that saying all projects are have regional significance or regional importance.
That makes this a lot more palatable. I don't think it should be specific to any one project or two projects. It needs to be more region based. That's what I think that our goal was with this. And that's what I think that the governor missed specifically, that this was very much a Maricopa County vote that he vetoed on our behalf. I am always in the position that whatever it is that we are looking for residents to be able to vote on, that it actually has an opportunity to get to those voters. I think it's very important for them to have that opportunity. It is not for us to make that decision. And I feel that's what the governor did in this case. But if we could change up a few of those words, I would be much more in favor of this resolution.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor.
Are there any members of the regional council online that want to have a say on this, or if your silence means approval? I will take your silence as approval. We have a motion and a second. Let me just clarify the motion. The motion is to move ahead. The motion and the second are move ahead with this resolution with some of the tweaks that were noted by Mayor Ortega and Mayor Wires. And did I miss anything?
I think it was without the tweaks, just because I don't want, staff to work on this for another 2 weeks trying to guess what we meant in our comments, and then it comes up again. And just to, and again, I don't disagree with the comments that have been made. I think it could be improved, but let's read the last whereas, because it doesn't say we're opposed to this and we're offended because we're not getting SR 30 and SR 24. It says the impacts are generational and slow developing and critically important, such as 30 and 24, and many other road and highway projects. So I think it's not saying, here's the two reasons we don't like it. It's saying, here's two examples of why we don't like it. So for that reason, I don't think it's a critical flaw, and I think we go forward with it as it is.
Mr. Chair, I did second the motion as presented by Mayor Giles, and I would concur just with the way it let it ride.
So the motion is to approve the resolution as presented without any changes. That's the first motion on the floor. If that motion fails, then we'll go to a second motion. So let's go ahead and do a motion and go from there. Let's do a voice vote of the room. All those in favor from Regional Council of approving the resolution as presented without any changes, please vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay.
Online, can we do an online vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will read the names of those participating virtually. Mayor Bien Wilner.
Aye.
Thank you. Supervisor Goodman.
Aye.
Thank you. President Vier.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Emercio.
Aye.
Thank you. Supervisor Hickman. Mayor Lavalde.
Yes.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Manfredi.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Mack.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Molina.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Pereira.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Bridget Peterson.
I will vote in favor of this resolution, although I expressed my concerns with some of the issues. So aye.
Thank you. Mayor Schoaf. Vice Mayor Smith.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Woods.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, everyone. Who led the clapping? Brock did, okay. Next item is, are there any requests from the members of the Mag Regional Council for future agenda items? Anyone? Chairman Sellers.
Are there any requests from members of the Transportation Policy Committee for future agenda items? Seeing none?
Item number 7 is comments from the committee. Are there any additional comments from members of the MAG Regional Council? Seeing none?
Are there any additional comments from members of the Transportation Policy Committee? Seeing none? The Transportation Policy Committee is adjourned.
We are sharing gavels. Regional Council meeting is adjourned. I'm good. Thank you.